Oh, Marjorie, how are you? Nice to see you.
Good.
We're starting now, so everyone please mute.
Shalom, and we just welcome everyone on here tonight, even as far as Israel. So, shalom. In the book there of Genesis, chapter 12, reading verse 1 to verse 3, the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I'll make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I'll make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you." Shalom.
Well, as we are still waiting for, have we got Warren? I'll just check if he's there. If not, it looks like I'm going to need to go first instead of last. Hi, Jamila. Hi, David. How are you? I'm going to put you on, if you don't mind, on co-host as well. David, if you could put it on speaker view for us, that will be great. So we're going to, I really want to share tonight, even though I was going to be number 3, I'm now number 1 speaker, but the Jewish indigeneity is a really important issue. And one of the reasons for this is what we have seen is that the pro-Hamas movement has been basically hijacking the Aboriginal flag and has also been hijacking the Aboriginal movement basically in Australia, or some sections of it. So I think this issue of Jewish indigeneity, which the 3 of us are going to be discussing tonight, is very, very important. For some reason, Marjorie's view is turning up rather than the speaker view, so I'm not sure why that is. However, I think when you have a look at it, Jews are indigenous to Judea. The Arabs are indigenous to Arabia. That would seem a fairly simple proposition, wouldn't it? Thank you for that. And so I think there's a lot more to it, but that is a fairly basic thing. Now, what I believe is important is that Jews need to be represented in international forums of Indigenous people that have been occurring for decades. And why is that important? Because Jews are Indigenous to Israel, but they need to be in those international forums and making their case, because what's happening in international forums around the world, the Palestinians are often cited as the Indigenous people of Israel rather than the Jewish people, and Israel is seen as the oppressor, colonizer, occupier of Palestinian lands. And so I believe, as Indigenous Friends of Israel co-founders, Norman and I, that that's a very key issue, and I would expect it would be for many of you as well. And so it's worth knowing that there was an anthropologist called Jose Martinez Cobo, who was asked by the United Nations to be a special rapporteur on discrimination against Indigenous peoples. And what he did in 1982 was to develop 5 points that indicated whether a group of people were Indigenous or not. And these 5 points were ratified in 2004 by the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Affairs of the United Nations and have been generally accepted since. Now, only one of those 5 has to be ticked off, basically, so that a group can be considered Indigenous. Israel can tick off 5 boxes quite easily. And so its claim to indigeneity to the land of Israel is very strong. So number 1 is occupation of ancestral lands, or at least a part of them. And so Israel can fulfill that. The Jews have been in the land of Israel for about 4,000 years, and there has always been a remnant there despite colonization and exiles, etc. Archaeological records, there are many that support that, including records of the pharaohs and records the Arch of Titus in Rome that recorded the conquering of Jerusalem in AD 70, and many more. In fact, artifacts have been recently found in Gaza as well. Then we have the historical records of the Bible and independent historian Josephus and others. So that's number 1. We have a look at number 2, common ancestry with the original occupants. And so Technikon and the Ramban Medical Center in Haifa have recently done genetic studies that show that the Jewish people are not 90% of Jews are actually linked to the Levant, and there have been other studies as well. So even the Ashkenazi Jews, which many people consider white Jews, not Middle Eastern Jews, they have at least 50% or more Middle Eastern heritage, according to other studies. So the other thing is that the Jews who have resettled Israel since the Holocaust as refugees from the Nazi regime that killed 6 million Jews, and other Jews from Europe who have settled there, they are considered white by many of their critics. But, you know, Israel must be one of the most multicultural nations in the world. We have Black Jews from Ethiopia, we have Asian Jews, we have Latin American Jews. And the other thing is too, there were about 750,000 Jews that were kicked out of Arab lands in 1948 as a reaction to Israel becoming a state. So it's easy for the Jewish people to satisfy number 2, common ancestry with original occupants. Number 3, culture, including religion, living under a tribal system, dress, lifestyle, etc. And so with regard to that, we know that Judaism is based on agricultural feasts, on the seasons, and very much it's focused towards Jerusalem in terms of the prayers. Next year in Jerusalem, many of the synagogues in the world face towards Jerusalem. And so what we also have is, even for secular Jews, with the feasts, which are very much tied to the seasons and to the land of Israel, these are part of the culture and part of the tradition of Jewish people, whether they're observant or not. We have a distinctive dress. We have the 12 tribes of Israel. And so I think it's quite easy for us to be able to say that the culture and religion of the Jewish people establish their rights to the land. And so that's number 3. Number 4 is language. Well, we know that Hebrew has been spoken in Israel for thousands of years. And even when Jewish people were exiled into the diaspora, Even developments like Yiddish and Ladino were very much based on the Hebrew language. Hebrew is still a national language in Israel today, in prayer life, just in daily life. So I think it's important, and we're welcoming Warren now. Hi, Warren.
This Sydney traffic. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. We'll I'll just finish this and we'll hand over to you. And so the fifth marker of indigeneity is residence. Well, we know that the Jewish people have been resident in the land of Israel for 4,000 years, even though sometimes it's only been a remnant because of the exiles and the colonization that has occurred. So it's very easy to establish Jewish indigeneity by those 5 characteristics identified by the United Nations. However, it's very interesting that there is also a definition of Indigenous that is not included in these 5 characteristics. And who knows, it may have even been added to try and keep Israel out of being decided as Indigenous, despite their strong claims. And that is that it has to be a non-dominant group of people. Now, that's hardly surprising, though, considering that Indigenous people often have been invaded by other nations who have occupied and settled their lands. However, I'm flagging this because this is probably a very key reason why some people are resisting the fact that Jewish people are in fact Indigenous, even though they can meet all of those 5 criteria when you only need to meet 1. So what we have is that activists and anti-Israel activists and academics, etc., even teachers, they are basically saying that the Jews are colonizers, settlers, and occupiers. And we know, of course, this is a very, very topical issue at the moment, which is why we're discussing it tonight. But it's simply not true. And we have a number of reasons for that. So one of the reasons is that it's their ancient homeland that the Jewish people have returned to. They've not settled, they have resettled. They have not colonized, they have decolonized. And it's so important for us to realize that. How can they colonize their own land? That's point 1. Point 2, Israel must be the most colonized nation on the earth. It's been colonized by Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, the latter 2 sent them into exile, Persians, Greeks, any number of Arab, Islamic states or empires, and we have the Ottoman Turkish Empire. That's just to name some of them. And so that's point 2. Number 3, there's always been a remnant in the land. And these points, I believe, are really important. And fourthly, Israel has never invaded another country. Never, ever. Arab nations have invaded many. Israel has had to fight many wars of self-defense, however, to survive attempts to wipe it out. We have 1948, 1967, 1973, various intifadas, and the latest one being October 7 and the current war that is occurring. So what we have happening here is we have a change from seeing Israel as being oppressed to being an oppressor, and from being a victim to being a conqueror. So number 1, the Jews had the sympathy of the West when they were victims of Nazism, and 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazis. and that was partly what enabled them to reform the state of Israel. Secondly, but now that they have successfully rebuilt Israel, now that they have a flourishing economy, now that they have successfully defended themselves, the left has turned on Israel. We see it on our streets daily. So now Israel is seen as the oppressors rather than the oppressed. Thirdly, Israel no longer gets sympathy because it just does not fit the Marxist narrative of oppressor and oppressed, and of being a victim. Fourthly, it's a false narrative anyway. That doesn't fit the facts. Western activists and academics are absolutely obsessed with Israel. Even the United Nations has so many resolutions against Israel, very disproportionate to what is happening in the world. And it ignores the fact that colonialism has been practiced by many countries. Fifthly, they particularly ignore Arab Muslim colonialism. And six, should we call the descendants of the Arab colonists in Israel indigenous? I don't think so. And I think that's an important point. But the Arabs living in Israel have full citizenship, and they do have equal rights. It's not an apartheid state, as many claim, because Arabs are in most professions, even in the Parliament or Knesset. We also have what I want to flag is that whole concept of white privilege. Critical Marxist theory is not only anti-West, it's anti-Israel, it's anti-white. So academics and protesters see Israel as white erroneously. In fact, they are obsessed with attacking it. And I've discussed why Israel is not a white nation. It's the most multicultural nation in the world. So I won't go there again. The Palestinians are not Indigenous, and we really need to look at that. I've covered it elsewhere, but I'll cover it briefly tonight. The Arabs only started calling themselves Palestinians after 1967, when they lost Jerusalem and in the Six-Day War. Jordan had only had it from 1949 anyway, up to 1967. Jordan only became an independent nation in 1946. So secondly, the UN petition plan, this was during when the British Mandate, which came in 1922, was ending. That resolution to have a two-state solution and petition the British Mandate, it was between the Jews and the Arabs. No mention of Palestinians at all at that point in history. Thirdly, the Palestinians are not Indigenous to Israel, and they don't have lines or links of descent to the ancient Canaanites or the Philistines. In fact, both those groups died out centuries ago. The Philistines died out in the 6th century when they were taken into exile by Nebuchadnezzar, the same as when the Israelites were taken, but they did not survive that exile. However, the Palestinians have taken on a false identity, and I think this is really important. The Palestinians have taken on spiritually and psychologically the identity and perceived wounding of and perceived injustice of the Philistine people, and they've taken on that ancient hatred. They've taken on the violence of that Philistine people. We know Hamas in Hebrew means violence. And so what is happening is we have a whole people that have developed with this false identity. It's very convenient one, propaganda-wise, and it's actually working quite well propaganda-wise in the world. But the Philistines were not even Arabs. They were a Greek people from the Aegean Sea. They were sea peoples. They were invaders. And so we see the horrible atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7. And it's like they're assuming the identity of the ancient Philistines. And it's not just to it's not just because it's useful propaganda-wise. I think it's something they're actually reveling in as well. The Palestinians do have some rights of a long-standing presence in Israel, but this does not top or outdo the indigeneity of the Jewish people. So the cultural origin and ancestral ties of the Palestinian Arabs actually relates back to Saudi Arabia. In fact, some Palestinian Arabs may not even be ethnically Arab, but because they've been colonized by Arab peoples, they've taken on the culture and language of the Arab people. They have been Arabized, so to some extent, and therefore identify as Arabs. Now, I will just finish on this. With regard to the Canaanites, there is a claim that because the Hebrews in the Bible, in the Torah, basically it talks about the Hebrew people displacing the Canaanites. Some people are saying that the Jewish people aren't indigenous, the Canaanites are, because of that. But there have also been archaeologists who suggest that the Canaanites were actually subsumed by a Hebrew ascendant people. Nevertheless, there are no Canaanite people today, and there's no Canaanite collective culture that exists, so it cannot meet any of the 5 characteristics that the UN and Indigenous people worldwide have agreed on to be able to say that there is an Indigenous people called the Canaanites that has a prior claim to the land of Israel. And I think that's really important. So Jewish people are Indigenous to Israel, and there's no serious competing claims, only propaganda. And so I would really urge you that for the 3 speakers tonight, Warren and Peter and myself, that you would get this message out to people by sending the recording out to people and just talking to people about it as you would. And also we've started a crowdfunding campaign to help us with an public education campaign to professionally put forward the points of view that the Jewish people are Indigenous to Israel and their rights need to be protected, and to mitigate some of this anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and anti-Israel bias that we are facing in our nation and in many nations of the world. So I thank you very much for that. And we're going to hand over now to Warren Mundine, AO. And I'm sure many of you know him because he's a famous Indigenous Australian. He's a businessman. He's a political commentator. And he is a very key person in our nation. I'm sure you've read his bio, and I'm very happy. And he's also an author, so read his books. Okay, so we're going to hand over to Warren now. Thank you so much, Warren. We know how busy you are, and we're very delighted to have you, and we'll have all the questions at the end. Thank you. Over to you.
Just a quick question. How long do you want me to talk for?
Round about 15 minutes.
Okay.
But if Peter doesn't turn up, you can have a bit longer.
Oh, okay. You shouldn't say that to a bloke who hangs over the politicians. I could talk forever.
Now,
Anyway, I'm glad you mentioned my books, because they're at a very reasonable price at every good bookstore if you want to buy them, and I need the money. In regard to this whole issue of what's happening in the world, I think the world's gone a bit crazy. I come from a Christian background, a Catholic faith. I've been to Israel on 6 occasions for business, for politics, as part of the Australian, Israeli, British and American leadership dialogues over the years, as well as friends. I do have friends in Israel, and I've been to weddings and holidays and that with those people. So I put that up front. So I've actually, talking from experience on a number of levels of actually being in the Middle East, and I've been to Jordan and Lebanon and so on, but to Israel the most. And I have friends over there who are Palestinians and who are Jewish, and who are the Ethiopian Jews, as well as the Bedouins and so on. So just following on to what Barbara was saying, really just reinforcing it, I just find this unbelievable, the commentary that's going on today. When you actually go to Israel and visit it, or do business here or whatever, you find it is an incredible multicultural, multi-faith, multi-ethnic, a liberal democratic state which operates on the rules of law and has many, and everyone's equal, and there are many liberties and freedoms that you don't get in other countries around the Middle Eastern area. In fact, the times I've been there, it's incredible to be there, because if you name any the major religions and that, you will find that they are there. There's you've got the Baha'i temples, you've got the Christian churches and holy sites, of course, where Jesus was and the apostles. You have the Jewish Temple Mount. You have and I've been to Armageddon as well, which is quite an interesting place to go. And that's another place where you look at the Romans. So you go into Armageddon, and you actually in the 2,000-year-old aquatic water system is still working. So the Romans, gee, I wish we had Roman plumbers today. Actually, it's a bedrock of history. Now, when you go there, of course, there's something like nearly 2 million. This is why I'm very careful about my words about Palestinians and Hamas and that. When I talk about the war that's going on at the moment, I talk about Hamas and the savagery and brutality of that organisation and its allies, such as Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah and that. I won't get into the details of that, because I think you've heard it a lot. In fact, I'm going over to Israel on the 4th of October. The 4th of October. I've been invited over there by the government and friends for the memorial, the 7th of October memorial that's going to be happening there. So I'll be doing flying over doing the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th tour, and then I'll be flying back to Australia on the 9th. It would be a good time for me to catch up and see what's going on over there, catch up with friends, but also, to be part of that emotional memorial services that will be happening while I'm there. It is a war zone. Currently, at the moment, you've got in southern Lebanon, the Hezbollah firing rockets every day into northern Israel. Something like there's several thousand Israelis who have been evacuated from the north, and there's virtually ghost towns up there now at the moment because of the fighting that's going on. And then you're also talking about what's happening in the south in regard to Gaza and the missile attacks are also still happening there. And of course, overnight you heard about the Houthis were firing missiles into central Israel, as well as the getting missiles from out of Syria and firing into the area. So it's a total war zone at the moment, but no one talks about that actually in the mainstream media. But what I wanted to talk about tonight was what an amazing country Israel is. As I said, I've been going there since 2006, and it was a very moving experience for me because they actually see the holy sites that are there, the thousands of years of history of the Jewish people that are there. And then, of course, as Barbara said earlier, it's got to be the most invaded country in the history of the world. Just about every, they had the Romans, and you had Alexander the Great, and you had the Greeks with the Macedonians, you had the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Ottomans, and the list just goes on. The Arabs, everyone forgets it. One of the things in the arguments is that some people, not all people, some people point the finger at Israel as a colonizer, the Jews as colonizers, and that, well, the Arabs, they're colonizers. They come out of Arabia. That's where the Arabs come from in the 600 AD and invaded that whole area. But I've been there. I've stayed on farms with friends of ours who are Palestinians. They're Christian Palestinians, and they're good friends of ours. They're citizens. They hold full citizenship of Israel. They vote in elections. I've met Palestinians who are members of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. Been elected there. There are there's Palestinian judges. Israel is as I said, a liberal democracy, so it's judged like in Australia by the rule of law. And in fact, there has been several, a prime minister and a president who have actually gone to jail because of the rule of law and corruption that they did. And you could not imagine that happening in other parts of the Middle East, where the courts actually charges were brought against people and senior people, and they were found guilty and went to jail over it. In fact, when I think it was the president was actually found guilty with the jail, the chief justice of the court that sent him to jail was a Palestinian. So they're in all walks of life. You go around, they're farmers, they're in the police force, they're in the military, they in everyday life, in the public service, running businesses. I go down to Jaffa, the old Turkish town of Jaffa, and you'll see marvelous restaurants where the Palestinians and the old Turkish restaurants and that are, and it is a amazing, vibrant, very much a beautiful country to be in. And of course, when you not only talk about the Palestinians there, which is nearly 2 million of them, you've also got the Bedouins who are there, and they also have full citizenship rights as well. and do serve in the police and do serve in the military and do serve in the parliament and also in other areas of the society, running businesses, etc., and everything that's going on. You see the Ethiopians, the large Ethiopians. I like that they talk about the Jews as these white supremacists who come there as colonizers, and you go around and you see every color under the sun, black, brown, white, pink, yellow, whatever, are living there and living in peace together. Some of the most marvelous things I had was, like I went up into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and it was just this amazing thing. As I walked in, there was this Arab Christians, young girls, just from a young Christian school, and they were singing in Arabic their hymns, and you could hear it echoing through the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and it had this amazing, incredible, moving, spiritual thing for me to hear the songs. I've been to church on Christmas Eve at the Church of the Nativity Church in Bethlehem. In fact, I was in that church only in 2018, and guess who walked past me as I was there? It was the president of the Palestinian Authority. In fact, I stood only less than a meter away from him in that church, and in that church they said prayers, and it was in English, of course, Latin, Aramaic, Arabic, and many other languages. It was a very long church service, I can tell you, because of all the languages and all the people that were there, and it was amazing to be there. And then, of course, you've got Christians, as I said, you've got Jews, you've got Muslims, you've got atheists, you've got Baha'is, you've got a whole wide range of different cultures and different religions that are there. Everyone is treated equal. In fact, on my second trip there, I was staying at King David Hotel. I walked out the front one morning, and it was a Saturday, not a Saturday, a Sunday, and it was a gay and lesbian Mardi Gras was happening there, and so you get all this amazing, incredible things that are happening with this community. So all the stuff you hear about the Jews are being colonizers, they're not indigenous. They've been there for thousands of years. I don't know how long you've got to live at a place before you're considered indigenous. In fact, the Jews in Israel have been longer in there as indigenous people than some other places. They've been longer in Israel than the Maori have been in New Zealand or Hawaii, the Hawaiian. So this nonsense that they're not indigenous, and anyone who, as I've read the Bible and I've went to a Catholic school, you get educated and you look at history, you just see that that these people are lying. It's a total nonsense that they're talking about. You can chop their lies down quite easy. The amazing thing about Israel too is how successful the country is. You go into Tel Aviv, for instance, which is a highly technology center, and of the world. In fact, the technology that are coming out of some of the universities in Tel Aviv and that are incredible. In fact, Australia has been a great benefactor from all those as well. And so, I've been into Muslim restaurants, I've been into Ethiopian restaurants, I've been into Bedouins and Palestinians and everything like that. And and Christians and Jewish and everything. So, and everyone has, it's an amazing mixture of people. In fact, I sat on the Della Rosa, which is the road that Jesus went along carrying his cross before his crucifixion in a Turkish cafe, actually, drinking Turkish coffee. And I think every race in the world walked past me while I sat there for that hour. You know, so to say that Jews are not indigenous to Israel is like saying Aboriginals are not indigenous to Australia. We've been here thousands of years. They have been there for thousands of years in a continuous. And then you see Jews right across North Africa and through the Middle East. They've been there for thousands of years as well. Even though there's been, if you talk about ethnic cleansing, there has been, you know, since 1948, a lot of cleaning out. So not a good word, but a lot of cleaning out of Jews from all over North Africa and the Middle Eastern areas. It's, you know, I'll probably finish it off there. But remember that there's more freedoms, more liberties, the rule of law, and a democratic state of Israel where everyone is treated equal under the law, and you have so many different races, so many faiths, and so many cultures operating there. It is an incredible place to visit and to go to. In fact, I recommend it to you. You know, sort of when things settle down from this war that's going on. But it's you know, just do not accept the propaganda, do not accept the lies that have been spread. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful, Warren. We're very blessed to have you share, and you know, from a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge. So that was a real blessing. So it doesn't appear that Peter Walker is on here at this point. So how about we go to questions, and I'll just ask Norman to look after this. And so if you've got any questions of Warren or myself, would you like to just raise your hands, or there's a little facility down the bottom there where you can raise your hands as well, and Norman will look after whoever puts their hand up first can ask the first question.
Rick, is it?
Sorry?
Rick,
hi. Thank you so much. My name's Rick. I'm in the music industry. I've been a manager for 25 years and a producer, and was the co-chair of the National Music Managers Association for many years. And what we've found here is that, sorry, just one sec. In the music industry, the deception and the amount of misinformation that's coming through is just overwhelming, and it seems that the whole industry seems to have bought into it. Specifically for Aboriginal First Nations Australians people, there's a specific target where there seems to be this understanding that the hot button is to talk about colonisation, to talk about the evil imperialists who are coming in to take over, etc. And because people don't have an understanding of the history and the nuances, they're just swallowing it up. And of course, you know, just following on what you're saying, it's totally untrue. The Jewish people have never been conquerors. There are 27 state-sanctioned religious countries in the world, Muslim countries. As Warren and Barbara said, there's 2.2 million Arab Palestinians in Israel, yet in the rest of the Middle East, Israel's 1/6% of the landmass. In the rest of the Middle East, the 99.84%, there is now 5,000 Jews, where there was 850,000 Jews. So really, it's such a deception, it's such a delusion which so many people have swallowed. And I find myself trying to have individual conversations with many people. And I have a real focus with First Nations artists to talk about them, have a conversation, and some go well, some don't go so well. But I just wonder if you had any advice on to how to sort of have these conversations and try to further that discussion.
Yeah. Well,
Speaking to it.
it's really about dealing with facts, and the facts are, you look at the history of the area. In fact, one of the things in fact, I stayed at a bed and breakfast in Jaffa, and you look down to the point, the southern point there, where you see history. Actually, you see levels of history. You see where the Jewish groups were. Then you see the Romans, and you see the Greeks, and you see the Assyrians and the Babylonians, and it's sort of like just these levels. And then you see the Christian churches, and you see the Muslim mosque and everything like that. And it shows you, who's at the bottom level of that is the Jewish. So it shows that they were there before anyone else was there. Yeah, and and I just find it quite ignorant, that people have, not learned history. You only have to get, look and read as I said, the Bible. You read any history or archaeological book, and you will see that the Jewish people are not colonizers from somewhere else. They have always been there, and as a people. And then you look at they talk about apartheid. Well, I've never seen apartheid in if Israel is an apartheid state, then the world needs more apartheid states. That's what I say, because people live free and they live equal, and there's no one who's herded off into some areas, and that it's just bizarre. As I said, I've got Palestinian friends and Ethiopian and Bedouins and Jewish friends and everything, and even some atheists who in Israel, and they're all treated equal before the law. They're all there, so there's no apartheid. No, it's total nonsense, And you'll see in some, if you look around on some YouTubes on YouTube, you'll see where South Africans, even though South Africa has taken Israel to the International Crimes Court, you will see that there are South Africans who sit there and say, we lived under apartheid. Israel is not an apartheid state. There's no white beaches or black beaches or Christian beaches or Muslim beaches. They all swim and go to the beach together.
Thanks for
Really.
your question.
And I've seen it. I've been there. As I said, since 2006, I've been there many times.
Thanks for the response. Gillian, you also have your hand up there as well. Gillian Gould.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I've worked with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia for about 20 years. And before that, I was in New Zealand working with Maori people. So when, we hear people identifying themselves, they identify themselves, what nation they come from, what Aboriginal country they come from. And for the last 3 years, I've been identifying myself as an Indigenous to Judea. And I don't hear anyone else do that. I feel like I'm a little bit out on a limb, and it's a little bit of a scary place to be. I have not only identified myself like that on presentations and public forums, I've also in my papers, my academic journal articles, where, I've got colleagues who are Aboriginal who might put Wiradjuri after the name or Worimi, and I'm putting that after my name. So I think it is actually important, if we are to walk the talk and we're saying that we are indigenous to Israel, this is where we have come from, that we start saying that we are, especially if we're in forums like Barbara mentions before, we should be in those international forums, and we shouldn't be shut out from them, that we start, taking the courage in our hands to say, I am Indigenous. I'm an Indigenous person. I belong in those Indigenous groups, and I would love other people to do it so I don't have to feel that I'm the only one, because I do feel extremely vulnerable being the only one to say that. And I always think people are going to challenge me. And so I just like to put that out there for any other Jewish people on this meeting. That I would like to talk more about that, with other people who, may be nervous about it, or, and I would like more confidence, thanks, from my Aboriginal brothers and sisters in Australia.
You know what a good hint about being Indigenous to an area is, like me, I'm Bundjalung descent and northern New South Wales, southern Queensland, southeast Queensland, is your history and your stories. When you talk about it, all my histories and stories of Bundjalung is to one area. That's northern New South Wales, northeast New South Wales, southern Queensland area, from the Clarence River to Beenleigh, and all this, my history and my stories come from that area. And so when you talk about Indigenous people, say the Jewish people, you're talking, okay, what's your stories? And guess what? They all come from, they come from Jerusalem, they come from the Judea, they come from there. That is your history.
And I have, talked about my nearer history, of my family escaping pogroms in Eastern Europe, before that in Spain. Like, if we're alive today as Jewish people, we have survived these serial colonizations. Our DNA has survived. That's just like a miracle, and I think we should be proud of it and talk about it and find a way to talk about it and learn from you. I've learned so much from my Aboriginal brothers and sisters how to talk about it, but I don't say I've got it right, yet, but, we need to learn from you. And we need to have the courage. And if you can give us courage, help us find that voice, like with meetings like today, that would be really good. Yeah.
And also, just because you live off country doesn't mean you're not Indigenous to your country. Like, I call myself an economic refugee because I live in Sydney. Why do I live in Sydney? It's because this is where my work is. This is where I brought my children for education, and that has not diminished my Bundjalung culture, and hasn't diminished who I am as a Bundjalung person. So just because Jewish people live in Europe or North America or Russia or any other place like that doesn't mean that they still were not Indigenous to Israel, to Judea. It is their stories. It is their Bible. The Torah, and it is all there. Which leads you back there to that land, and that's what it does with me. I go back to northern New South Wales. My community comes out of Bayugal, which is 80 kilometres up the Clarence Valley from Grafton, and I take my children backwards and forwards there to be connected still back to their culture. And this is what Jewish people do. You go to Israel, and you see Jewish people come from America and from Russia and other areas and that, who are going back to get their roots and keep their connection to their history and their people. that, you know, just because, people have been a couple of generations or whatever out off country doesn't mean they're not still indigenous to that. You look at the Cherokees in North America; they're living on the other side of the country now, after the journey of tears from the eastern United States under the Jackson administration when he was president. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that then the Cherokee are not still indigenous to that community in that around Georgia and that, even though they're living now in Oklahoma. It's their history, their stories that take them back to those areas. So it's a nonsense, to say, well, for thousands of years the Jews have been lying about themselves. No, they're not. They actually, that's where they live. That's where they come from. That's where their story is. That's where their history and their beliefs and everything come from. That.
Yes, no, look, that's awesome. And I would like to encourage you. Thanks, Warren, that's great. I'd like to really encourage you, Gillian, to keep doing that and to encourage other Jewish people to do that as well. And, it might seem a strange thing to say, but everybody in the world is Indigenous to somewhere. We may not be living on the land we're Indigenous to. So
yeah, I'll give you an example of that. My great-grandfather, my mother's side, was Irish. You've probably heard of the Donovan family, Aboriginal family, that we're descendants from that side, from my mother's side. And I went to Ireland. They could come from Western Cork, and I was like I was going home. I went there, and the people said, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, well, great-grandfather come from here." And they went, "Oh, yeah. What was his name?" I told them his name, Jimmy Donovan, and they said, but I said we call him Donovan in my family, and they said, well, that's what the original name is, Donovan. It's O'Donovan. That's what we were, and so it was like, for me, that was a journey going home as well to that, and so I tell you what, I think that we had a great conversation for a couple of days and had a few Guinnesses and all that type of stuff, had a bit of fun, and they told me some wonderful stories. I reckon 99% of them were all lies, but it was great stories and we had a great time. It's about those roots that we go to, and so look, this narrative that they're selling, they're like snake oil salesperson. They're just lying, completely lying, because the facts of history and the facts of your own journey, your own stories lead you back to one place.
absolutely. And look, after Steve asks his question, I need to answer a question from Roger that is put in the chat. So over to Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to firstly thank Barbara and Norman for what you're doing. As a Jewish person in Australia, it's really heartwarming to know that there are people who are well informed and who understand and who are friends. And so I can't express my gratitude enough. So thank you, and thank you to Warren also for everything you're doing. I guess what I wanted to say is that the very reason we're having a discussion with this topic, to actually point out that Jews are indigenous to Israel, is because of, and we've spoken a lot about lies and narratives, false narratives, and I think I'd like to point out that this is something that goes back a long way. It's been 100 years. I mean, it started with the Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Mufti of Jerusalem, in the 1920s, stirring up hatred against the Jews who were living there and the Jews who were coming to Israel under the new sort of modern Zionist movement to reestablish the Jewish homeland. Hajj Amin, the Mufti was an ally of Hitler, and he basically had a genocidal ideology. He was planning with Hitler had Rommel succeeded in crossing North Africa and capturing the region of Palestine, the 600,000 Jews that had made their way there would have been put into death camps built by the Mufti. And he and his descendants and his heirs, which were Arafat and today Abbas, and then all of the others, the Hamas and Hezbollah and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and it's an alphabet soup of terrorists. It's all an outcome of this genocidal campaign that's been going on for 100 years. And most of the Arabs of Palestine have unfortunately adopted this. I mean, there were Arabs initially in the 1920s. There were many Arabs who welcomed the Jews coming back and wanted to work with us as brothers, but it's the genocidal ideology which won out, and it's been ingrained for 100 years. And part of that genocidal ideology is this lawfare campaign that started at the 2001 Durban conference, and the whole BDS campaign and all the lies about apartheid, genocide, and ethnic cleansing have been created as part of that genocidal ideology. I guess the question I would throw to you all is, how do we defeat that? I mean, we've got basically a Palestinian population which is supportive. I mean, over 85% of Palestinian Arabs in the West Bank support what happened on October the 7th. They consider it okay. They actually applaud it, even more than the proportion of Arabs in Gaza that support Hamas. That's the task that we have, is to de-radicalize this population of several million Arabs. And I mean, it's a big question, but that's what needs to be done. And how do you think we should be going about that?
I can just answer that briefly. I would like to say that the first thing is we have to disband UNRWA, and the nations like Australia and the US, etc., who fund UNRWA need to stop doing so. It's not going to be easy to get rid of Hamas in control of Gaza, but that needs to happen too. And really, it's not going to be easy at all, but we have to start somewhere. And the thing is, in Germany, that Nazi ideology, there is some of it that remains, but a lot was done to eradicate that Nazi ideology.
Yeah, it was exactly the same.
We would hope the same thing could happen in the Palestinian
they have to do,
territories.
I don't know if there's such a word, they have to do de-Hamasize the Gaza, and that's the only way look, the issue isn't really about Hamas and Hezbollah and other people. There are always going to be crazy people around. There are always going to be Nazis and idiots around. The issue is our leadership, our Western and liberal democracy leadership has failed us badly. The 9th of October, I was horrified that I would ever see such a thing in Australia. That here were people on the steps of one of our biggest tourist locations and symbol of our nation, the Opera House, the Sydney Opera House, and there was the Israeli flag was put up there for us to show that we are with the Israeli people because of what happened on the 7th of October, and it turned into an anti-Semitic bullying and horrifying chants that I never ever thought I'd ever see. And our police force, and I don't blame the police force, because the police force only just follow what they're told by our political masters, which is the way it should be, stood there and did nothing. And that horrified me. It was the worst thing I've ever seen and it was shocking to see. And so it's really about us, and this is where we've got to look at, I don't want to get too into the politics now, but we can't have people like the Greens sitting in our parliaments. They're anti-Semitic. There's no doubt about that. That we can't, we've got to, Anthony Albanese is our Prime Minister, and the Leader of the Opposition, Peter Dutton, to stand up and fight for the values of our society, which is we're a non-racist, we're equality society. The rule of law and decency is supposed to happen. I didn't see any decency on the 9th of October. That is just a nightmare to me, that we in our own country were vilifying our fellow Australians with one of the most ancient hatreds in the history of humanity in regard to anti-Semitic chants. It's totally
and I think it's been very traumatic for Jewish people in Australia, and totally agree with you, Warren. It's been a failure of leadership, and the vitriol that's come from the Greens has been so disgusting, and I'm glad there is some pushback at the moment. But where we really need to focus also is the education system, because we have teachers who are pro-Palestinian and drumming it into children at a young age. We have university professors drumming in the pro-Palestinian point of view. So it's no wonder we have young people out on the streets who have been brainwashed. And so that's one of the reasons that we're starting a public education campaign to try and deal with that in the schools and in the public. We've got to win back the hearts and minds of our nation. We've got to win back the streets. We've got to win back the schools and the universities.
And it is a battle, but we can't be silent, because this is not just some little thing. This is a global thing that's happening, and when these type of things happen, we know the history of what happens from there, and we've got to stand up. We just got to be. Some people say to me, "Well, why are you doing this? You don't have to. You're not Jewish. You're not." Not Israeli and that. And I said, well, these are my fellow Australians. These are my fellow human beings. These are my fellow Indigenous people. And I just cannot sit back and see anyone, being attacked in the way that's been happening. And it was total lies. And so we got to stand up and challenge those lies. One of the most sad, not sad, it's just pathetic, really, was what Sydney University did, letting those people sit and demonstrate all the time. I had 2 daughters who just graduated from Sydney University, and they were said that, they're not Jewish, but they said they were under fear because people would come up to them and say, well, what side are you on? Challenging them to pick a side. And if you said you're picking the Israeli side, then they'd abuse you and threaten you. We just got to stand up to bullies. We just can't let bullies get away with this stuff.
Absolutely. We don't have someone else with their hand up at the moment, so I'm just going to quickly respond to Roger, which asked a question in the chat, wanting to know what that definition was of the UN that includes the words non-dominant. So the definition of Indigenous people, according to the UN, is Indigenous communities, peoples and nations are those which, having a historical continuity with pre-invasion and pre-colonial societies that developed on their territories, consider themselves distinct from other sectors of the societies now prevailing on those territories or parts of them. They form at present non-dominant sectors of society and are determined to preserve, develop and transmit to future generations their ancient territories and their ethnic identity as the basis of their continued existence as peoples in accordance with their own cultural patterns, social institutions and legal system. So I hope that answers your question, Roger.
Thanks, Roger, for that question. Jamila, I saw your hand there go up. You want to ask that question, Jamila?
Yes, I just want to say something here. You know, being a believer here in Australia, I mean, I've only been here. I always like to say, you know, we are talking in the mainstream. However, to me, since I know being a believer here, when the Lord was showing me about the one new man, I believe we within the body of Christ have a bit of a crisis to know of was that the one new man, when we are men to be the branch. This is the branch. Israel is the branch, and I have now maybe more boldly to talk about churches with replacement theology. You know, when talking about Israel, what are they to us? You know, I'm very grieved about it, because since October 7th, and we have one Messianic brother was trying to get together and encourage him to have even like a praying meeting for Israel. You know, I mean, there's very few support from churches to even want to announce, to encourage, to if who feel led to pray with our brother, pray for the nation of our sisters. To me, as a believer in Christ, you know, and very few responding to that, Barbara. You know, so sometimes when we look at the big picture of our salvation in Jesus Christ, you know, when we go back to being, you know, I'm not talking about my past, you know, when I look at October 7, if anything like that happened to any one Muslim country, the ripple effect in the earth will rise up, and where are the Christians? You know, and you know, I'm thank you for doing this, because you know, Mr. Warren, and into that we can bring this up and the knowledge, because even I've been busy with a lot of things with this last month. I've not been part of doing a lot of things, you know, talking to several our Indigenous people here in South Australia, in some remote people, you know, and they come from different, I mean, I could not say anything, but, you know, when you know my background, I don't understand denomination when talking about, you know, the value, the worthiness of to stand together as a family of Christ. And, you know, Israel is like our big brother, you know, and they are in crisis. You know, what do we do about it? You know, and it is time, as Mr. Warren said, you know, we cannot be silenced anymore. You know, I mean, like for me, I live up here in Adelaide Hills. Sometimes I make my business to walk about, you know, and, you know, meet people down the road and just say, hey, you know, and I know I get a bit of flack, but at the same time, we just say, I'm just sharing what you think. You know, people wouldn't dare to talk and ask, what do you think? Yeah, I just want to share that. It's just sad.
Yeah, the other thing too, as Christians, this nonsense that Jesus wasn't a Jew is just insane. You know, if there's no Jews and Jesus wasn't a Jew, then there's no Christianity. Very simple. It's not rocket science to work out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jamila. Look, just have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with people in your home or the nearest coffee shop, and just influence people to the extent that you can. So we've got 10 minutes to go. Unfortunately, Peter hasn't turned up. But look, we've been very blessed to have Warren sharing. We've got 10 more minutes for any questions. I don't know if any of the Jewish people on here might have wanted to comment on what Gillian raised earlier at all.
Did anyone want to respond?
I'll just quickly say something if no one else wants to. Just a general comment, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought came to mind to me when Warren was talking about the Opera House, that you know, this isn't just about Jewish people. This is about Australia. This is it's not about Jewish people anymore. You know, it's a bigger issue. And the other thing I was thinking was that what was it? Sorry, it's left me now. You know, this is a bit controversial to say, but you know, we're talking about what needs to happen with dehamatizing. I love that word, but I think in Australia we also need to keep an eye on that, and I just hope that you know, the people in charge in this country are actually onto it because I worry about it. From my perspective, I kind of have a look at what's going on, and you know, I just hope that whoever's in charge here knows what's going on and is onto it. You know.
Yeah, because these people are very, you know, look at Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad and ISIS and groups like that. They even murder Muslim people who, because they're not their Muslims. These people are just haters. This and unfortunately, some of our institutions and our some communities and left wing and the Greens and that have fallen for this propaganda and this nonsense that it's spilled out from these haters. You know, we've seen this throughout history, and we know the lessons of history. And the first thing to do is you try and dehumanize and make people out that they're what they're not to be. You know, so you make up things. You talk about white supremacists and colonizers, and you just make rubbish up, which it has no historic fact to it, and it's just built on a continuing hatred of a part of our global community. Now, in Australia, you know, we are made up of Indigenous people, and we're made up of migrants, and we're like Israel in a lot of ways. That we've got a multicultural, multi-faith, multi-ethnic society. We're a liberal democracy with the rule of law and liberties and freedoms. And I think it was someone just said a few minutes ago about that this is not just only about Jews. This is about Jews are the target, yes, but it's about our society. Do we want to remain a peaceful society where people can go about practicing their faith in peace, practicing their multiculturalism? You know, I always joke that, you know, I'm glad we've got a multicultural society now because it saved me from a lifetime of Devon and tomato sauce sandwiches. I could go out and get Thai and Chinese and Turkish and all these other wonderful foods, you know, and we treat everyone equally here. And this bullying and these attacks is a threat to our social harmony here, and that's just a fact.
Thank you.
One more question.
Last question. Yes, that's right. Then Norman will finish off.
Here we go, Steve.
Steve.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to take the opportunity to respond, as you suggested, to the lady earlier who said that as a Jew, she identifies herself as indigenous to Judea. I think that I applaud that and support that wholeheartedly. To me, it just you see people trying to divide the Jewish people. Oh, you can be anti-Zionist and still be a Jew. That's not possible. Zionism is like inherent to Judaism. Zionism is about our connection to the land for thousands of years, just like the indigenous people of Australia have had tens of thousands of years, roots that go back tens of thousands of years in the land. We have that. It permeates our prayers, our daily prayers. It's in our poems and in our songs. It's an intrinsic part of being Jewish. I mean, Yehuda Halevi, poet, he was at the ends of the earth in Spain, as far east as you can go, and he dreamt of going west. He wrote poems about going to Jerusalem and watering the ground with his tears. And this is something that we need to explain to people, that this connection is profound. And I must say that Australian Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders understand this so well because of the similarity of experiences that we've had. Thousands of years of connection to land, and also terrible experiences of oppression and alienation from the land. And I just wanted to applaud that lady. And I think it's very important that as Jews, we identify ourselves that way. And I'm very grateful that you've recognized the importance of that factor by having this session. Thanks again to you and to Warren for what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, we are really, what a night we had. Very, very special to have each one of you on here. As far as Israel and very good friends, Shalomi and Miriam was on here. Also other friends that we've met for the first time tonight from the land of Israel, and that's been a blessing. Warren's been fantastic to have. Great to have you on, the sharing from your heart tonight, and everything that yes, the steps leading up to the next journey, as they say. See you again. Well, this year in Jerusalem, and I'm sure that's going to happen for many of us here also on this Zoom. I might just ask Shalomi, if you would like to just end off in the Aaronic blessing for us, Shalomi.
He's still there.
Shalomi and Miriam, you still there?
Yeah,
we
we're
are.
Would you like to
we've been
finish off in the Aaronic blessings there for us as we go from here?
Okay.
You might like to just quickly say a few minutes and
Hallelujah.
יברכך אדוני וישמרך, יהר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך, יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום, השלום של ישוע המשיח.
thank you, Shalomi.
Amen.
Many of you that met Shalomi and Miriam for the very first time, Shalomi won't mind me saying this, but he was many years ago the bodyguard for Ariel Sharon, right back there, Israel's Prime Minister. and very good friends of ours that when we go to the land of Israel, we've always connected up with
And they're
them
coming
in
here next
Tel
year,
Aviv.
hopefully.
And Shlomi and Miriam will be also making their journey from the land of Israel to the land of Australia. So we will see that happen very, very soon. And we will meet again, each one, for the very friends that we've met for the very first time. Please stay in touch. It's so important as we continually build these relationships and that we are having. And Zoom is one of those things to importantly that can be just the technology of things right now, right around the world. So on behalf of Barbara, myself, and the Indigenous Friends of Israel International, and also many friends within Australia and internationally, we say shalom to you and God's blessings, shalom's richest blessings upon each one of you. And may his peace be with you and go with you and be strengthened. Thank you for your encouragement. Thank you many for your words. Thank you for many for the comments. As we say, please and stay in touch, family. We are family. And I'm your family and you're my family.
Mishpacha.
Shalom.
Mishpacha.
Good night.
God bless you all.
Bless.
God bless you.
Shalom. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Blessing. Shalom.
Shalom.
God bless us all.